Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. I just wanted to make a quick video about something that's been kind of bugging me over the last few months. Now, if you have a look on any forum or any website really, generally speaking, you'll see people complaining how life would be better if Marvel Studios owned the rights back to their key franchises, namely Spider-Man and the X-Men, and to a lesser degree the Fantastic Four, and how much better as comic fans life would be if Marvel were to produce their own movies regarding those three properties. Now, I actually have to disagree, and here's why. But first of all, let's imagine a world where Marvel always had the licenses to those three properties. Now, Marvel's modus operandi so far has been to release 2 films per year. So if they had never lost the licenses to, say, Spider-Man and the X-Men specifically, I actually question whether we would have ever seen an Avengers film. And the reason I say that is because X-Men and Spider-Man are the franchises that Marvel would have been focusing on. And I don't know if we would have seen the maybe lesser-known heroes get their own movies, at least for a little while. But that's hearsay. So let's just say, for example, what would happen if Marvel got their rights back to their films now? Well, I actually think it's going to be a similar story. If Marvel suddenly had the rights back to those 3 franchises, but I'll talk more specifically about X-Men and Spider-Man, they tend to be the big 2 really. I actually think once again we wouldn't see as many of the smaller heroes or the smaller franchises coming through. I certainly don't think we would see Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it's unlikely that we would see a Doctor Strange film, and other heroes that will probably come out of the woodwork at some point. Things like Black Panther or Inhumans. I just don't think we would see them, because if Marvel continue with their 2 films per year strategy, then chances are we would at least see every year at least 1 film of Spider-Man, X-Men or Fantastic Four, leaving 1 other film to be based on, say, an Avengers property. So I seriously doubt we would have seen any other sort of the B-list superheroes. Take, for example, Ghost Rider, which recently went back to Marvel Studios. I highly doubt that we will ever see a Ghost Rider film again now. And if it does happen, it won't be for a long time in the future, I don't think. You could argue possibly that, yes, the other studios' Marvel films may not be as good as quality as Marvel Studios themselves. And yeah, that could be an argument, but at the end of the day, these films are getting made. If Marvel Studios had the rights, there'd be less comic films, period. And I think people actually look upon these films a little bit unfairly. Now, before I made this video, I actually had a look on Rotten Tomatoes, a look at the actual scores of these sort of franchises, and they may not be as bad as people think. Now, the X-Men franchise and the Spider-Man franchise commercially have always been a success. So there's no doubt that these films made by Sony and Fox have always been a commercial success. But were they critically a success? So if we start with X-Men first, the original X-Men score on Rotten Tomatoes is 82%, which is a decent score. X-Men 2 is at 87%. X-Men 3 had a dip, was at 57%, and that one will be classed as rotten. Wolverine was the lowest score, and that was at 38%. And then the top of the score was X-Men First Class at 88%. Now, if you average those scores out, that gives you an average at just over 70%. So the X-Men as a franchise, who are owned by Fox, have an average score of 70%, which is a fresh rating. So they're both commercially successful and critically successful under Fox. Spider-Man. Spider-Man actually fares better than X-Men. So the initial Spider-Man has a score of 89%. Spider-Man 2 has a score of 93%, being its best score. Spider-Man 3 actually has the lowest score I should probably expect. It's 63, but that is still actually a fresh rating. And then The Amazing Spider-Man has a score of 73%. And that gives Spider-Man franchise as a whole a rating of 79% for Rotten Tomatoes. Now, a lot of people sort of complain about that site, but that isn't a site itself that gives one rating. It's a collection of a variety of different critics, so I actually think it's a fair representation of the critical scores that people generally give these films. So I don't think it's a realistic argument to say that these franchises are crap, because quite frankly they're not. For the most part, the franchises have actually done a better job rather than a worse job. Yes, I agree, there's some films that I think were way off the mark, but as a franchise, yes, they're not too bad. Admittedly, Fantastic Four as a franchise fares fairly badly, but to be honest with you, that's really a second-tier franchise, I think, over the big Spider-Man and X-Men franchises. Because of the success Marvel has had both critically and commercially with their own properties, I actually think this will inspire both Fox and Sony to improve their game on their own superhero franchises. Let's be honest, the X-Men First Class was a pretty decent film, and that was the last X-Men film to be released from Fox. And by all accounts, although it's not actually out yet, so I can't say this with any certainty, the new Wolverine film looks pretty good. And I think that it sounds like they're on the right track with Days of Future Past as well. Now, arguably, you could say that The Amazing Spider-Man kind of has mixed reviews, and I would agree with that. But I also don't think it was a bad film, but it did suffer mainly because obviously it was an origin film. So I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 would be a better film to judge where that would go as a future franchise. But I certainly don't think it was a bad film. The current way it is, we're getting 2 Marvel films per year based on their own studios, and then 1 or 2 other films a year based on the Fox and Sony properties. So as a comic book fan, we are far better off having these properties based in other studios. I was actually quite sad to see Ghost Rider, etc. go back to Marvel Studios, because I know we're just not going to see them anymore. Yes, I agree. The films weren't fantastic, and I think there were some differences that they could have been made. Nevertheless, simple fact of the matter is, if you don't like these films, you simply don't have to watch them. But at least this way they're getting made, and then we have the choice to watch them. So that's my thoughts on the current state of the Marvel, both from their own studio and from the other studios. So I'm sure there's going to be some people to disagree with me. What do you think? What's your opinions on it? Leave me a comment, and I look forward to you next time. Bye for now.